Hidden in plain sight, the undercover owner noticed something unusual about one of his waitresses. Clara Jennings moved quickly between tables, her right arm in a sling, the fabric frayed and stained from days of wear. With only one hand free, she balanced trays, carried plates, and forced herself through every sharp pulse of pain. Yet, instead of compassion, her manager, Victor, lashed out at her for the smallest slip, a misplaced cup, a slower step. Diners exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering in sympathy, others muttering at the harshness of his tone. What none of them knew was that Clara's injury wasn't as simple as it appeared, and Victor carried secrets that went far beyond his cruel temper. Sitting quietly in a booth near the window, Daniel, the true owner, disguised as a customer, realized something didn't fit. And the more he observed, the more unsettling the truth became. Before diving deeper, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps us share more stories that matter. Stay with us until the very end. And if this story stirs something in you, drop a comment below and share it with someone who needs to hear it. The diner carried the heavy scent of burnt toast and overbrewed coffee that seemed to cling to the walls. The morning rush filled the room with chatter, clinking cutlery, and the crackle of eggs on the grill. At the heart of it all was Clara Jennings. She didn't stand out by choice, but her tireless pace drew eyes all the same. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, apron dusted with flour and grease. She balanced cups against her hip, carrying plates with practiced precision. The sling-bound arm barely moved, every shift of her shoulder betraying the ache beneath. A wince flickered across her face when her body betrayed her, but her smile never faltered. That smile was her armor. Behind the counter, Victor leaned lazily against the register, his smirk curling as he barked out orders with sharp cruelty. "Move faster, Clara. People aren't here for charity service." Victor's voice cracked across the diner, sharp enough that heads turned. A few customers frowned, murmuring at the scene. At table 3, 2 women in crisp business suits leaned closer, their voices low but clear enough to carry. "Poor girl. Look at her arm. She shouldn't even be working like that. Tell me about it." "But Victor, he's always riding her. Doesn't matter what she does. I don't know how she puts up with him." Clara heard them. She always heard them. The whispers, the sympathy, the snickers behind her back. But most of all, she heard Victor's voice, the sting in every word he hurled. Each step she took was slower than she wanted, but stopping? That wasn't an option. Rent didn't care about broken bones. Bills didn't pause for pain. By mid-morning, sweat dampened the back of her neck, her good arm trembling from the strain of carrying too much on its own. Still, she kept going. At table 6, she set down plates with a tired but steady smile. "Enjoy your meal," she whispered before turning straight into Victor. The impact tipped the glass she was holding, water spilling down his pressed shirt. The entire diner froze. Conversations stopped, forks hovered in midair. Victor leaned down until his sour coffee breath washed over her face. His words came low and venomous. "Clumsy again? Or just trying to milk that little injury for sympathy?" Around them, chairs shifted. Customers exchanged uneasy looks. One man cleared his throat, as if he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. "Man, give her a break," someone muttered from a nearby table. But Victor didn't so much as glance at them. His gaze was locked on Clara, predatory, deliberate, as if savoring her humiliation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, reaching for a towel with her good hand. Before she could grab it, Victor snatched it away. His grin was small, sharp, and meant only for her. It wasn't about the spilled water. It was about power, and Clara knew it. Because weeks earlier, she'd stumbled onto the truth. It had been late one night after closing. Clara was wiping down tables when she heard voices through the thin office door. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but Victor's laughter carried through. At first, she thought she'd misheard. But when she pressed her ear closer, the words were unmistakable. He was bragging about pocketing money from the register week after week. The shock froze her in place, but not for long. The office door creaked, and suddenly he was there. His eyes caught hers, narrowing in a way she'd never seen before. A dangerous kind of anger. He lunged forward, grabbed her wrist, and twisted. The crack echoed in the hallway. Pain seared up her arm, dropping her to her knees. "Clumsy, huh?" he hissed. "Keep it that way. And if a single word leaves your mouth, you won't just lose your job." That night marked the beginning of her silence. And now, with her arm bound useless, Victor paraded her weakness in front of everyone, painting her as incompetent, careless, disposable. By the end of her shift, Clara's body shook from exhaustion. She leaned against the back counter, whispering a prayer no one was meant to hear. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching. Someone she thought was just another customer, quietly eating a plate of eggs and toast. But Daniel's gaze was steady, thoughtful, and it was about to change everything. Most customers drifted in and out without paying much attention, ordering pancakes, leaving a couple of crumpled bills if they felt like it, then hurrying back into their lives. But one man never seemed in a hurry. He was older, late 60s maybe, with neatly cut white hair and boots that looked like they'd walked farther down back roads than city streets. The regulars called him the vet. He carried himself differently, straight-backed, even when sitting, his eyes sharp, taking in more than most people realized. To anyone else, he was just another retiree passing time with a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs. But Daniel Cross wasn't just another face at the counter. He was the true owner of the diner. For years, Daniel had chosen to keep his identity hidden, preferring to melt into the background. People revealed who they really were when they thought no one important was watching. And Daniel had always believed that the truest measure of a business wasn't in the numbers, it was in the people. That morning, he stirred his coffee slowly, his gaze fixed on Clara. He'd been watching her for weeks. She worked harder than anyone else on staff, but she was also the one Victor singled out. And now, with her arm bound tight in a sling, she looked like she was fighting gravity with every tray she lifted. Each smile she gave customers looked carved out of pain. At the next booth, two young men leaned close, speaking just loud enough for Daniel to hear. "Man, that manager's got it out for her. Yeah, I've seen the others slack off plenty. He doesn't say a word to them, just to her." Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd run enough businesses in his lifetime to recognize bias and worse, cruelty. Victor strutted past his table then, laughing at something on his phone. Clara struggled nearby, trying to carry a stack of heavy dishes with one arm. "Little help?" she asked quietly. Victor didn't even glance at her. Instead, he smirked, muttering, Try using both hands. Oh wait, you can't. His chuckle scraped across the diner like nails on glass. Daniel didn't move, but his silence wasn't apathy. It was calculation. Daniel didn't react outwardly. His face stayed calm, his hands steady around the chipped mug. But beneath the surface, his blood simmered. Later, as Clara wiped down the counter, he caught it, the faint wince when her wrist bent too far. Subtle, almost hidden, but unmistakable. He also noticed how carefully she kept her distance from Victor. Not the kind of distance born from dislike, but from fear. The kind of fear that said getting too close once had consequences. When the lunch rush thinned, Daniel quietly asked for the manager. Victor arrived with his usual swagger, already smirking as if he knew what the complaint would be. What's the problem? Coffee too weak? Food too cold? His grin widened, confident. Daniel shook his head. Just wondering about that waitress. The one with the sling. Why is she still working the floor injured? For a split second, Victor's expression cracked. Then the grin snapped back in place. Her? She's clumsy. Always messing something up. Half the complaints in this place are about her. But she begged to stay on shift, so I let her. What can I say? I'm generous like that. Daniel nodded slowly, though every word burned like acid in his mind. Generous? No, he'd seen Victor sneer at her pain. He'd seen customers whisper about the unfairness. He'd seen Clara push herself past the breaking point just to keep her dignity. That night, Daniel stayed long after most had left. His coffee sat untouched, cold. From the corner booth, he watched Clara clean tables with her one good hand. She still managed a faint smile for the stragglers, though her eyes sagged with exhaustion. The old veteran narrowed his gaze. If Victor wanted him to believe Clara was the problem, then Daniel would find the truth for himself. And if his suspicions proved right, someone in that diner was about to regret underestimating both her resilience and him. The next morning, Daniel returned. Same corner booth, same black coffee, same quiet presence. To everyone else, he was just the old vet with nowhere better to be. But his eyes weren't on the menu. They were locked on Victor. Victor strutted from table to table, cracking jokes with customers, laughing louder than anyone else, as if the diner was his stage. But Daniel wasn't fooled. Behind that laugh, he was looking for control. And Daniel Cross had seen men like him before. The moment Clara walked by, Victor's grin disappeared. His eyes tracked her, every move like a hawk waiting to strike. If she poured coffee too slowly, he snapped his fingers. If she wiped the counter twice instead of once, he smirked and muttered about wasting time. Daniel watched closely, piecing together a pattern. This wasn't random criticism. It was deliberate, targeted. And when Clara fumbled a single fork, Victor seized the moment. He shook his head dramatically, loud enough for nearby tables. See what I have to deal with. Always careless. A few customers chuckled nervously, unsure if he was joking. Clara bent to pick up the fork, her good hand trembling, her cheeks burning with shame. By then, Daniel's suspicion had hardened into certainty. Victor wasn't managing her. He was setting her up. That afternoon, Daniel slipped into the back office, pretending to be looking for the restroom. The door was ajar. Papers littered the desk. His eyes fell on a thick stack of misconduct reports. all with Clara's name scrawled across the top. Petty accusations, spilled drinks, forgotten orders, bad attitude, dozens of write-ups. Daniel's jaw clenched. He had been eating in this diner for months. He had never once seen Clara lose her composure, never once seen her mistreat a customer. The paperwork was a setup. Then he noticed something worse. Cash register tallies. The numbers didn't add up. Week after week, the totals dipped, but no reports had ever been filed. Daniel's stomach sank. He knew theft when he saw it. He'd caught men like this before in his old businesses. Victor wasn't just cruel. He was dirty. That night, Daniel lingered in the diner long after most had gone. His coffee sat untouched as the last customers left. Victor disappeared into the office. The door left cracked just enough for voices to slip out. Another $5,000, easy. Victor bragged, laughter echoing through the hall. And when they notice the cash missing, that little waitress takes the fall. She's already got the most write-ups. Nobody's gonna believe her over me. The second voice snorted, the sound of one of Victor's drinking buddies. You're playing with fire, man. What if she talks? Victor's reply came low and cold. She won't. Not with that hand. Broke it good enough to remind her who's in charge. In the shadows, Daniel froze. His fists clenched tight. His chest felt like stone, each breath heavy and sharp. This wasn't just theft. It was abuse. Calculated, physical, cruel. And Daniel Cross had just heard enough to know he wasn't leaving it at whispers anymore. Daniel thought of Clara, her quiet smile, the way she worked through pain, the way she carried burdens no one else could see. Something twisted deep in his chest. The drunken laughter in the office faded behind him as he slipped out into the night. Cool air bit at his face, grounding him. For the first time in years, the instincts he thought he'd buried came alive again. He'd seen injustice in far corners of the world, but to find it festering inside his own business, that was something he could not and would not let stand. The truth was out, and tomorrow the mask would come off. The morning rush returned like clockwork. Coffee pots hissed. Forks clinked. Voices rose and fell in a familiar rhythm. Clara moved from table to table, her wrapped hand pressed stiffly against her apron. To most customers, she looked like just another weary worker pushing through. But to Daniel, she was carrying a weight far heavier than plates. Only today wasn't going to be like every other day. Daniel stepped inside. Same worn boots, same denim jacket. But there was a difference in the set of his shoulders, the steadiness in his stride. He wasn't here as a customer anymore. He was here as the owner. Victor lounged near the counter, laughing too loudly, joking with two waitresses who forced smiles and rolled their eyes the second his back turned. But when he spotted Daniel, his grin faltered. You again? Victor called out. Back for your usual eggs? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the center of the diner and tapped a spoon against his coffee cup. The metallic ring echoed through the room, slicing through the chatter. Conversations died down. Forks froze midair. Even Clara stopped mid-step, her eyes flicking toward him in confusion. Daniel's voice carried calm, but beneath it was steel. Good morning, everyone. I think it's time you all knew who I really am. Victor chuckled nervously, trying to keep control. What? Some kind of joke? But Daniel's eyes never left his. And this time, there was no smile. "You writing a book or something?" Victor sneered, trying to mask the unease creeping into his voice. Daniel's gaze never wavered. "No," he said evenly. "I own this diner." The room went dead silent. Somewhere, a fork clattered onto a plate. Clara froze mid-step, her eyes wide, lips parting in disbelief. For years, nobody had known the quiet old man in the corner booth was the one signing their paychecks. Victor barked out a laugh, but the color had drained from his face. You're joking." Daniel reached into his jacket and laid a thick folder on the counter. Pages slid across the surface: misconduct reports, financial ledgers, register logs. "I've watched long enough," Daniel said. His voice was steady, but sharp as glass. "I know what you've been doing, Victor. Every false report you filed against Clara. Every dollar you skimmed from the register. And I know what you did to her hand." Gasps rippled across the diner. Customers turned in their seats, whispering. The two women from the business booth leaned in. "I knew it," one hissed. "I told you he was dirty," Victor stammered, his voice cracking. This is ridiculous. You can't prove." But before he could finish, the bell over the diner door jingled. Two uniformed officers stepped inside. Daniel had called them that morning. Their very presence froze the room in silence. Victor's bravado crumbled. "Wait, you can't. This isn't." The words cut off as the cuffs snapped around his wrists. Customers erupted in murmurs, their voices rising as Victor was dragged out, his protests drowned beneath the clink of chains. Clara stood rooted to the floor, her good hand pressed tight against her chest. For once, Victor wasn't towering over her. For once, the weight of blame had shifted. Daniel turned toward her, his voice gentler now. "You've carried this place on your back. While others lied about you, you kept it running. From today forward, you're not just a waitress. You're the new floor supervisor." Clara blinked, tears brimming. Her bandaged hand trembled as she lifted it to her lips, a muffled sob escaping. Around her, customers clapped, some softly, some loud enough to fill the diner. And for the first time in years, Clara straightened her shoulders, not as the woman people pitied, but as someone finally seen for who she truly was. Outside, Victor's shouts faded as the police car pulled away. Inside, the diner smelled the same: burnt coffee, fried bacon, but the air felt different. Lighter, cleaner. Daniel returned to his usual booth, coffee in hand. But this time, he wasn't just watching, he was smiling, because justice had finally been served. Never underestimate the quiet strength of those who keep showing up, even when the world tries to break them. Clara's story proves that truth always rises, and justice always finds the guilty. If you believe stories like this should be told, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and leave your thoughts below, because your voice matters too.